Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mike's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, we are diving into this is why Fishburne Palace is Britain's most extraordinary Roman site. Without further ado, though, just like always, we're going to dive right into it. So let's roll.
In 1960, an engineer was laying a water pipe in this sleepy corner of Sussex and found what looked like Roman remains. Called in the archaeologists and they excavated them. Months and a couple of years. They found more and more. It looked like a villa, then a particularly grand villa, then a collection of villas, until they realised that in fact it was a palace laid out on imperial lines, the largest Roman domestic building ever found north of the Alps.
Yeah, see, to me, I think it would just be like the coolest, most craziest thing to be able to find, just anything from the ancient world, even something as small as, like I say, a hammer or something used in war, anything like that. It's just the fact that this has gone through. Not only was this used like thousands of years ago, but it's gone through a journey like no other. Like nothing can explain, like be able to explain the journey they went on. So it's just crazy to me to think about that. But
found north of the Alps. Today it's known as Fishburne Palace. And the footprint is comparable, maybe slightly even bigger, than Buckingham Palace. So this mosaic shows us a really important piece of evidence for the early history of the palace. These dips here are formed by post holes, wooden stakes dug into the ground. Now they were here because before the palace ever existed, probably just when the Roman armies were arriving in Britain around 43 AD for the invasion, this place became perhaps a beachhead where logistics were stored. So a granary was built here on wooden posts raised up above the ground, just a simple wooden.
So in other words, I'm saying this was not only a Roman, palace, which is amazing on its own. This is one of the first Roman palaces, or not Roman palaces, but Roman buildings, in Britain, which is pretty amazing to think about. I'm saying? Like, how old and ancient that really truly is. And the fact that, like, look how, like, well designed, well built it is. The fact that it's still here and barely chipped up, you know what I'm saying?
The ground, just a simple wooden building. When they came to build a palace, they laid these mosaics over it. They didn't bother taking the wooden posts out. And so as you can see, the wooden has rotted and it's subsided down. So it's little clues like this that allowed archaeologists to tell the story of this palace, which is actually a giant mystery. No one knows for sure why it was built, who it was for, and even exactly what it looked like. This next group of mosaics,
I'm guessing most likely it was probably for the governor, or the Roman governor who was in charge of Britannia or whatever at the time, who wanted to be as close to the beachhead as possible. That way, he can be there for whenever anything happens and gets there and be there at the port, but at the same time, live in essentially, barbarian territory in comfort,
This next group of mosaics is really important because these are the earliest mosaics ever found in Roman Britain. They tell us a lot about what the palace, this vast, enormous building, was used for. The work is very fine here. It's up to an imperial standard. So the suggestion is that these mosaics were laid down when the palace reached its peak, when it was finished in about 75 AD. Perhaps they tell us a bit more about what this palace was for. Was it a grand imperial residence, perhaps for a local chieftain who'd sided with the Romans during the invasion and was being lavishly rewarded by the emperor? Certainly in its layout, it's similar to a vast imperial palace, something found elsewhere across the empire. It was an important center of administration and royal rule. But also, notice these...
I'm really inclined to think that it was built for the governor out there, because, you gotta think, those are mosaics. Look at the fact that, look how small those little pieces are. So that's, time and so much time put into that. And the fact that they're put in there precisely not to stay there forever. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're not just simply placed there. So it took a lot of time and work to do that. So that's why I say, I don't know if it was done for, a barbaric chieftain that, they probably looked down on, or who knows, but who knows.
And royal rule. But also, notice these mosaics are laid right on the ground. They're not built on a central heating system. So it could be this palace was designed as a reward for one individual, but without a view to the long term. Mysteries abound at Fishbourne Palace. This mosaic is, well, it's the most complete here. It's one of the most remarkable I've ever seen. You've got Cupid riding a dolphin in the middle and lots of symbols around the edge. It's suffered some subsidence in the middle.
Yeah, you almost got to think to yourself, like, how they must have, obviously drew that out on a piece of papyrus or whatever beforehand and then did it. But just the fact that they were able to do that and keep it going, because, obviously the stand that or the piece that he's standing on is probably new and wasn't there before, back in 79 AD or whatever, so it's kind of crazy to think about.
You're riding a dolphin in the middle and lots of symbols around the edge. It's suffered some subsidence in the middle, but it's amazing how well it's lasted all these years. It was actually not part of the original palace build. And experts say they can see the difference in craftsmanship with laying the mosaic. I can't really. But apparently this was built towards the end of the 2nd century, so around about 100 years after the palace was built. So although much of the palace seems to have fallen into a bit of disrepair after that initial burst of activity in 75 AD, there were still building works and improving works going on 100 years later. So somebody was living here.
Yeah, and obviously somebody who enjoyed the Roman life and Roman lifestyle, not, a simple... Because I don't think, people out in Britannia were living like that, you know what I'm saying? Or even knew how to live like that. Because it was such a long time ago, you know what I'm saying? But
100 years later, so somebody was living here. I love just looking at all the different corners. It rewards lengthy study, this. I love just looking at all the different shapes and icons in all the different corners and spotting small differences. For example, there's a little bird in one of those circles over there. Where's all the rest of flowers? It seems crazy in Britain to build a house without central heating, even here in sunny Sussex. But Fishbourne Palace had no central heating, which is part of the supporting idea that it was thrown up quite rapidly, designed to impress. That was put right, though, in the late 3rd century, around 275 AD. They started laying this underfloor heating called a hypercourse, where hot air would blow through here, fed by slaves in a big furnace. Hot air would blow through here and heat the floor above. A few interesting...
Kind of crazy that they waited almost 200 years to do that, though. That's kind of insane, so who knows?
Heat the floor above. A few interesting things about this. By this stage, the palace, bits of it had been demolished, that it was being used in different ways. So its heyday was past, but obviously someone still had an interest in it. And you can see evidence of that demolition of certain parts of the palace. These are some of these orange tiles here with the groove in them are roof tiles probably from the rest of the palace. They're now being recycled, built into this hypercourse system. And you can see there's a dog paw print there and human fingerprints there during the...
See, that has to be the coolest thing ever, just to know that an ancient classical human and dog that's their fingerprint, that's their paw print. Like, that's insane to think about.
There and human fingerprints there during the firing process. They would have made their mark. This hypercourse, this central heating system, was never completed because in around about 280, a fire seems to have destroyed much of the palace, and it was never properly reoccupied after that. We don't know what caused the fire. Was it an accident? Was it a mistake by the central heating engineers? Or was it one of the raids that we know were sweeping up and down the south coast of England in that period as seaborne raiders from across the North Sea started to attack the rich pickings of the Roman Empire?
Most likely, it was either the central heating people messed it up, or it was probably raided. That's just my opinion, though. Who knows? Obviously, only God knows, and the people who were there. So we'll see.
It's just another one of the mysteries that surrounds this incredible palace.
All right, guys. So yeah, thank you guys again for joining me on another episode of Mike's Intellectual Corner. If you guys enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Definitely some interesting stuff whenever looking into ancient findings and ancient archaeological findings and stuff like that. But again, thank you guys again for joining me on another episode. I'll see you guys in another one. I'm out.